I point out this exploded view diagram on just about every piece of equipment when I review it because it is extremely important. So the riving knife is not lined up correctly. This absolutely will not work. You'll go back through here and you're going to catch the wood on the riving knife, and you can't do that. Very dangerous. So I went to this and I looked at the detail of how it's put in there, and it turns out that you adjust it by loosening these. Don't know the extent of what I might have to do for that, but it can't be used the way it is. Okay, so I got my new handy dandy hex key set, SAE and metric. I bought these for 3D printers, but I leave it in the garage and just take the 2 or 3 that I use for 3D printers in with the printers. Let's find the right one to adjust this. The reasons I like them is they have the long handles. One of the bad things about it is they have a rounded edge, so you can go at an angle, which is great. If you have a screw you're trying to take out, this right here will actually strip it because it doesn't lock in. You have to use this end on the stuck screws. Since it's flat, it fits in really well, lets you get a grip. But if it's really tight, this might be a problem. And on a 3D printer, when it comes from the factory, they're tight. So let me show you that detail. So here is the riving knife. Here is the lock. There's how it's over the blade. And here's where you adjust it. Those 2 bolts hold the mount for the riving knife into the frame. So if I adjust those, I'm hoping there's a little bit of wiggle room in it. So I don't know how much of this you're going to be able to see because it's a tight spot. But let's put that in there. See, oh, those are tight. Okay, I just want to take the pressure off of it, and that's definitely the problem. See, as soon as I did that, it fell down. Seems to be lined up. It's most certainly lined up here on this tip. So if it stays true all the way back, and it feels like it does, if I do this to hold it in place, then all I got to do is tighten it down. We'll see if that works in real life. So I'll just come in here, tighten these. I won't worry about getting them super tight, just tight so that I can see if this is going to hold when I release this. And it seems to be okay. I won't know for sure until we adjust it back and forth a few times. That actually is okay. Well, that didn't work well, did it? If it's not repeatable, if I can't move it around and it stays accurate every time I move it, then I didn't fix anything. It's an imprecise move when you put this up and down. Notice when I put it down, it stays in the right. When I raise it, sometimes it doesn't go to the right position. It doesn't go to the right position is I'm not lining it up right on this pin back here. Kind of like an index pin. You got to get that in the right place for this to line up correctly. And when I pushed that down, I actually felt the riving knife shift just a little to seat itself onto that pin. Okay, here's the riving knife. I took it out of there to see what's wrong with it. This is where it mounts, and you line it up. What happens is if you put this forward to let this move, you slide it up, put it in the right place, and then lock it down. It looks flush, but it isn't. And that is caused by the inability of this hole to consistently go on that peg. See, if I wiggle that around, that gap goes away. I'll lock it in place, and there's no space here, and there's no space here. But I release it, pull it to the side, switch it to the other, and there's spaces. And that is caused by that pin not going up in the hole correctly. That pin seats in that hole on the riving knife, and that lets it stay in place, and that doesn't happen all the time. See that? You can see a space right here, and if you jiggle this around a little, see there, it went right on. But when you're moving this up and down, that's extremely hard. See, no space. There's a space. That one's still not in correctly. It'll look right, and then you'll tighten it, and it'll go wrong. So right there's what you have to do, is get no space and no space. But when it's down in there, it doesn't want to line up. And it has to do with this hole right here. On the Warrior saw, you do that, pull it up, lock it in, and it goes every time to the same place. You push it down, you lock it, and it's in the same place. This, on the other hand, the slider does not let that pin go in. So there it is in with no gaps. So if I unlock it, pull it to the side, lock those pins, that time I heard them lock, so I know they'll be okay. And that's why it's inconsistent. If you adjust it when it's flat like this, you can't always get it flat like that without fiddling with it. It's almost always that one that has the problem. So this is how it goes together. And even there, I lay that down, and it doesn't want to sit there. I have to adjust it. See, even if I line it up right, it doesn't want to seat in this hole for whatever reason. Now, one way to fix that is to round the edges of that. I can take a file and round the top edges of that. As long as I round the very top edge and leave the bottom square to this, not sloped at all, then that'll make it easier to go on. It'll make it easier for you to hit the sweet spot. I think this part here is not made correctly, but there's something wrong with that post. Either it's a little bit off or it wasn't lined up correctly with this. What it does is it has this mounted just like this, and this blade goes here, and when it's forward, those two holes fit over those pins. So when you lift it sideways and move it, you slide it to the other position and put it onto those pins. What happens when it's in the saw is this pin is having trouble getting up through that hole. Fits, but you have to fiddle with it. It isn't a push back, let go, and it fits like it does on the Warrior. So every time you pull that up and back, you got to be sure that that hole fits down over that pin right there. Okay, since we know the problem with the alignment is in the way the riving knife fits over that pin, we want to make sure that that isn't the problem. We want to be sure that's fully seated. Then we want to adjust the riving knife, fairly tightening those. So that looks pretty good. That's going to work correctly. So flip up the lock, pull this up, make sure it seats fully. But see, it didn't. I even looked at it to see if it seated fully, but it didn't. There. I had to play around with it to get it to seat fully. It's lined up correctly when it's up and when it's down, but those pins, you saw me struggling to line those up. So let's try it one more time. I'll pull this lock up to unlock it. I'll pull it to the side, push it down, and I'll see, from my viewpoint, there's no space between the riving knife and the mount. That should be lined up correctly. But when I push that down, there's a space appears. That means that those pins are not in those holes correctly. What's making it not lined up is user error, but it's really not user error because the pins are too hard to seat. So unlock it. I have to get those pins in the right place. And I still don't have it. There. That was a struggle for me to get that in the right place. If I'm using the saw and I need to change that, I'm going to unplug the saw, I'm going to take the cover off, I'm going to make the change. So I have to be absolutely sure I have those seated correctly before I put it back together, or the riving knife won't work correctly. So let's do it one more time. Pull this up. I know I have to seat those pins. And there they're seated. You can see that. There's no spaces here. It feels like it's in the right place. And when I push that down, do you see that space that comes up right there? That means that pin is not set correctly and that riving knife is misaligned. But I can fix that. I can unlock it and start there. I heard it click onto where it was supposed to go. And I'll tighten that up. And now this one isn't in right. So you see what the problem is. It's not seating on those pins correctly. Okay, I think I got that right. Okay, so I played around with that until I got it right. And it's lined up correctly. Getting it seated on those pins is the problem. Fix, you can always adjust it so you never have a space there, and that way you know you've got it hooked up correctly. And then check the alignment back here. Or you can figure out a way to get that to seat correctly every time. And I think that's filing the very top, putting a rounded edge on the very top of those pins. So let's do it one more time. Pull this up. I know I have to seat those pins. And there they're seated. You can see that there's no spaces here. It feels like it's in the right place. And when I push that down, do you see that space that comes up right there? That means that pin is not set correctly and that riving knife is misaligned. But I can fix that. I can unlock it and start there. I heard it click onto where it was supposed to go. And I'll tighten that up. And now this one isn't in right. So you see what the problem is. It's not seating on those pins correctly. Okay, I think I got that right. Okay, so I played around with that until I got it right. And it's lined up correctly.